Okay.
Got it.
Would it be helpful to have Dennis repeat what he just said for the recording?
And it would be helpful, John, if you would just touch on who we are and why we're meeting today.
Yes. Again, John Curtis and Dennis Bennett with the Integrated Organizational Development Consulting Team. We're here talking to Crystal about the possible future role that we could play in the organization. And we see that as an interim role, really wearing multiple hats, executive director primarily, but also we think we bring to this opportunity the whole IOD team, and that has to do with fundraising, board development, and strategic planning. We're learning about the history today of the recent transitions in leadership, and are excited to have genuinely, Crystal, I think we've been talking for a couple of years now.
Yes, we have.
And you've done a wonderful job. I've told Dennis a little bit about the authenticity that I feel from you, and you speaking directly to me, coaching me, providing guidance about how to interact and make a more meaningful contribution in our dialogue and to your board. So we're just delighted today to be given this chance to at least be considered as a resource and an interim solution, if you will, to some immediate challenges that you have.
And I thank you for contacting me with this idea, John. Just for the purpose of the tape, we've been talking for the last 15 or 20 minutes, but I was listening to Dennis explain how he thought he could assist us, and I asked if we could quickly turn on the tape, and I understand you wouldn't mind repeating that, Dennis, so that I could share this with my board.
No, not a problem at all. I welcome the opportunity. First and foremost, I'm a musician, and music is imperative to me. So this project's very special to me. I've served in a number of positions in the music field. I grew up in Cocoa Beach in the Brevard County area, and I've done a lot of work, as you know, with the ELC and some other organizations in the Vero in the Atlantic area. So it's also home for me. But we were talking about the transition, and this is tricky. And I've been through it 3 times in other projects. And one in particular that I was talking about with Dr. GYO is that I worked with the Summer Music Festival in Shreveport, Louisiana. That's a separate 501c3 subcategory from the Shreveport Symphony Orchestra, and worked with a gentleman, Lenny Kassinger, who had founded, it was 15 or 16, 17 years. He had founded the Summer Music Festival, which was in the off season, we would hire the musicians from the symphony to go in and do therapeutic symphonic work, playing for Alzheimer's organizations and assisted living facilities, et cetera, bringing music into that. I mentioned briefly earlier that my graduate thesis was entitled Music for the Health of It. And it's built on the research done by Oliver Sacks. I'm very involved in music as a healing force, I do believe. But in that transition, and it also was a semi-temporary, because I knew I was coming back to Florida after graduate was finished and all of that. Eventually, I was there for several years, but it was a transitionary so that Mr. Kassinger, Lenny, as we call him, can make that transition and retire. And because I wasn't there to build an empire, because I didn't have any egoistic, this is my baby, he and I worked very well together. And I'd reference him on that. I haven't talked to him about, I don't know, 5 or 6 months, but we do talk a couple, 3 times a year still. And so I kind of have a feel for this, I think, the little bit that I know. In other experiences, I was executive director for the James Burton Foundation, which is really why I went to Louisiana to do my graduate work in the first place, because James Burton is a hero of mine. If you're not a rock and roller, you wouldn't know. He was Elvis Presley's guitar player. He was a guitar player for Ricky Nelson. He was a guitar player for, all sorts of major influences. And I just wanted an opportunity to work with the man. I'm a guitarist myself, and he is, the king, as far as I'm concerned. So I got to run his nonprofit, which we were arts advocates for schools. And we were working, and they're still doing it, to put instruments and music lessons back into the school systems, because so much of that had been taken out. And that was just a wonderful experience. And I got to meet all my rock and roll heroes and blues heroes. And so that was marvelous. I also served as the director of development for the Orlando Philharmonic Orchestra. So I have been in the thick of the bureaucratic giant board political challenges out there. And that was an interesting experience, and worked with David Schillhammer. And that's actually where John and I met. I was the director of development. John was a consultant for the orchestra, and we came together.
I see.
And we worked together at the orchestra. So that's where we got our start. I don't know if you've ever seen the film Alive Inside. If you haven't, you should, something you should YouTube. And it's based on the work of Oliver Sacks, that they have determined, and you know this, I'm sure, but they have determined that in Alzheimer's patients and other dementia patients, that at a certain stage, only one thing can reach them and bring them alive, and that's music. And so that was part of the program. So I served as the executive director for an organization called Creative Care Associates in Altamont Springs. They were based in Altamont Springs. We covered all of Central Florida, where we went into Alzheimer's units and dementia units and brought planned music programs into those people to help revitalize and make their life better. So, you know, that's a quick history of my involvement in music, symphony orchestras, and the administration. My graduate work was in fundraising and in nonprofit administration.
So, and a footnote for the sake of the recording, if I may, and Dennis and I got together and he joined the IOD team, gosh, Dennis, 4 or 5 years ago. Something like that. Time flies. Yeah. And much of what his role has been, Crystal, has been outsourcing of when organizations are in need because they don't have the internal capacity at all to do fundraising, for example, or they've lost a leader in that role. And most recently, I'm not sure how many months you served for Barb Ford at the Environmental Learning Center as the executive director, essentially, of, or the director of development for the ELC, setting up systems and processes and working with her team of 4 or 5. And then we disengaged systematically and in a planned way. Barb could tell you more about that. That ended what, about 6 months or so ago, Dennis? A
little more, but we were, about 6 months or so ago. We were there, again, time flies. We were there a little over a year, John. So, and we did our goal there was to revamp the development department and get it rocking and rolling, and to hire a new development director. And we did that. Brought the person in, hired her, trained her, and she did such a fantastic job that about 6 months into it, she went and got a high-powered development job elsewhere. Again, we're still great friends, but gosh, love her. And so we had to start over, but we did it quicker the second time. You know, we knew our parameters. So I think Barb can speak to that.
Just for the for my board, John, IOD.
Integrated Organizational Development. It's a mouthful. That's why we go by IOD. There's a long story about that name, but that's who IOD is. We've been doing this work. We incorporated in 1999, based in Orlando, and with Dennis in Birmingham and back to the Space Coast and the Treasure Coast. I'm in North Carolina and in Orlando on a regular basis. There's about 6 of us on the IOD team, and Dennis is one of those members of our team.
I see. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I do know about Barbara Schlitt's extreme success with the Environmental Learning Center. She's been very supportive of the Gifford Youth Orchestra as an organization, and me personally. That's how I met you, John, was through Barbara, through the iCares organization that she created. And I'm interested in the idea. As I said, everything has to go through the board, has to be discussed and voted on, because the board made some decisions based on the fallout from our first experience with an executive director. And this video will be very helpful. So how do you see what would be the kinds of things that you would do for the GYO, Dennis? how would you start your progress, your process? What would your work plan be?
I have so many questions. There is so much I would have to learn about the operational side of this thing and how it interrelates. So that would be a tough one to answer with the little bit of information I have.
I see.
In the beginning, it's imperative that I know the board, know them all well, have their support, work with you, know you well, and the communication level. It was imperative. I know that with Lenny at the Shreveport Summer Music Festival, it's just we loved each other. We worked so well together and we communicated so well, and that's imperative. It's a three-way communication. That's tricky. I know it is. I've been through it. But again, I've got no designs on taking over the operation or being the kingpin. My job is to help you make the transition, find that right person when the time is right, when we're where we need to be to carry on. So I see myself as an interim. I don't know the length of time it would take. That would be up to you, the board, and how it works. The good news is you can pull the ripcord at any time if I don't meet your expectations with a little difficulty. So I don't have enough information to answer that. I see where you've had a major influx of cash in the 2020s. I've seen your 990s, very healthy. You're not grant dependent. I was really glad to see that.
Oh, we are. No, we are grant dependent.
I didn't see a lot of grant dollars, actual grant dollars in your 990s. Am I mistaken?
Well, we don't have a product to sell. We depend on donors and grants.
Okay, I was of the assumption that it was donor driven more than grant driven.
No.
Am I wrong?
Well, I should know because that comment, I should know, is not a response to you. I'm saying to myself, I should know what I'm getting ready to say because I handle all those documents. And we get large grants. I mean, large grants from donors. Maybe it comes in at the end of last fiscal year for this year. So
let me address that. I get our terminology correct.
okay.
I as a development director, I look at two different revenue streams. I look at grants and I look at private donors.
Okay.
So a grant to me is one that's written, sent out for for response, and then you adhere to the grant. That's one. I've done a lot of it, managed a lot of grants, written a lot of grants.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing, but grants come with responsibility. I much prefer donors who are committed to our mission, who's involved in who really cares about the mission. Mm-hmm. Got to have them both, but I prefer more donors than I do grants.
So do we. And personally, so do I, because the responsibilities for those grants that we receive fall on my desk. Mm-hmm. Things that need to be done after the funds come in. I'm in agreement with you. You might be looking at a couple of years where we received large donations from the estate that I mentioned to you earlier. All of the money didn't come to us in the same year. So I don't know which years you were looking at, but we received something like $75,000 one year and 200 and something thousand dollars the next year. You may have seen that report and therefore would naturally draw that conclusion.
Yeah, I did see. I just, I'll take this back. Government grants was very 22,000 is what I show in your 2020 990. So anyway, I'm just grappling to try to get information to prepare for this meeting. So what I saw was not grant heavy. So
we're grant heavy, we're grant driven, and I would like to change. We have to change that in order to grow and develop and in order to build. I have another question for you because we just spoke about operations. If you were assisting us, would you also be assisting us with our fundraising?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay.
Any good ED is, in my opinion, any good ED is always involved, as you know, because you've always been involved, is always involved in the fundraising.
No, don't trust that I really know, Dennis. John. I didn't know what I was doing when I started this program. I still don't know. I just do what needs to be done because it needs to be done. So I'm just saying, don't trust that I know what I'm doing.
That's fair. I'm learning that lesson all the time. It's like,
Well, yes.
but the underscore one quick point again, for the sake of the recording as well, our whole model is built around major gifts, donor-driven fundraising. So with Dennis potentially in an interim role as executive director and wearing other hats around not only operations and staff, but also fundraising, that would be the expertise we would bring. There would be an opportunity, frankly, to have us as a team, even though Dennis would be in the lead. And that's how to design and launch a long-term donor-driven campaign to raise the $1 million that you need, all tied to finding other new donors. There's a lot of high net worth individuals, as you know, in Indian River County. And we've helped, like McKee Botanical Garden, when they were building the children's garden, they raised a little over $5 million, finding new donors there who fall in love with the mission and become lifelong donors. So we move beyond transactional giving, where I write you a check at an event or go online and click your donate now button. So that's our model, is donor-driven fundraising. And I think that's one of the assets that we might bring to this opportunity.
And I'm certainly not anti-grant by any means, but you like to be in a position where the majority of your funding comes from independent donors who love the mission and allows us to choose our grants. Mm-hmm. There's some that that drive our mission astray. We don't want those. We don't want to be.
No, we're in agreement on that.
Yeah. So, but that's a goal. That'd be a long-term goal for us to develop in our development department.
So I have to ask John this question. At one time, the board made a decision between services that you offered and services that Carter was going to offer, and the board chose to go with Carter for these services. But if we were to contract with Dennis, I guess it's a question for you. I'm not sure who this is a question for, but would you be able to work with Carter, whom we are already paying for certain services and with whom we already have a contract? That
would be Dennis. Well, Carter is currently providing what services, if I may ask?
Right now we've been through the wealth screening, and now we're setting up appointments for Carter's people to interview the list of names that came out of the wealth screening process.
So they're running your fundraising campaign, it sounds like.
I'm gonna say, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we would be a duplicate, frankly, as far as my particular role specifically in fundraising. Our approach is different than theirs when it comes to fundraising, but it doesn't sound like you need to supplement or certainly replace them unless for some reason there is a desire to take a different approach. What we're proposing here with Dennis is stepping into that executive director role with that administrative function that Carter, I assume, is not providing.
Yes,
and if you recall, John, when Barb made the decision at ELC, it was a competitive between ourselves and Carter, and they chose us. However, Carter, I mean, it was not a battle by any means. We know the folks, we know them pretty well, and they know us. And we worked with them. We went on and worked with them because they had some other functions with the board, if you recall, at ELC. And I think we communicated well enough with them. So that have to be sorted out. Yes, we are the same thing. Correct, John? As Carter.
There's certainly some overlap.
Overlap. There's overlap.
Yeah, there's some overlap.
So that would be up to you what portions and parts, or you and the board, what portions and parts we would play.
Well, I
If
know
you-
the board, oh, carry on, go ahead, I'm
I'm
sorry.
going to say, if you contracted through IOD, I work through IOD. If you contracted for my services only, I'll work with Carter. Absolutely. I have
Mhm.
no problem with that.
Okay, so then the $1 million question is, what kind of fees are we talking about? Because that's going to be what the board wants to know.
Sure.
Of
Well,
course.
and you may not be at liberty, although probably have the information, may not choose to share, but certainly working within whatever salary structure you already had to set aside for the executive director, we would certainly work within whatever those allocated dollars are. And whether that's the full amount, and Dennis steps into that role as if you've hired him. And in some cases you really have, but it would be an interim, but whatever salary you prepared to pay that executive director is what we're thinking as a starting point. Dennis, is that fair to say?
I would think so.
We underpay because that's what our budget called for. And it's because I'm still on payroll, and we added the operations person in addition to the executive director.
Understood.
Yeah. So we were paying Lawrence $55,000 a year. And I know that that's probably nowhere near what you would be expecting, but that's what we were paying Lawrence.
Dennis will say more about that. It occurred to me to sound contradictory about Carter, given the opportunity, because I understand probably among other things, Carter is from their caliber and their experience and their presence in the community. My understanding is that they are in the higher price tier when it comes to consulting services. And you mentioned them starting to do interviews, which Dennis can do as well. So might there be a shifting of duties, a savings of dollars, frankly, with Carter, not to change horses in the middle of the stream, but to bring somebody on board where Dennis is great. And I'm tooting your own horn here, Dennis, when it comes to donor development, but doing one-on-one interviews. But I think, Dennis, I'll go back to your thoughts here about what she has mentioned regarding the budget and how much they were going to pay or were paying Mr. Davenport.
All of this revolves around what the duties would be. And there's a lot of work, a bit of work for us to, Dr. Majol and the board and yourself and myself, to figure out exactly what the functions would be. But one of my goals, I think, I'm imagining that one of my goals is to, in this transition, look for that executive director, find the right person, do any training that needs to be done after we've developed this transition period. And that's a job that I do, I'm proud of. I'm good at. Before I went into nonprofits many years ago, I was in corporate, and I did a lot of hiring and interviewing and large staff development and large staff management. So that I would think would be one of my functions. My goal is to help us find that person that fits into the system that we've made work. Is that correct?
Is it, you're asking me if,
Is that how you would foresee it?
oh, well, this is very new. It's a new step in the process. I haven't seen that as a next step.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that would be one of the differences between hiring an executive director today, ready, set, go,
No, I
and
understand.
hiring me,
Yeah.
is that I'm a transitioner.
Mhm.
However long that takes. Well, again, we were with the ELC for over a year, John, in that process.
I understand. It's like having an interim minister in the church.
That's
There
right.
you go. Yep.
I get that. Interim minister comes in and cleans the slate so that we're not comparing the new minister to the old minister.
That,
Yeah, I get the picture. But it is a new idea. It is a new step. But in a sense, it's the same step as the investment we made in getting me ready for that.
Right.
Because if we hadn't taken that particular interim step, I don't think I would be emotionally or psychologically prepared for the service that you're talking about.
Gotcha.
It's not a matter of just of someone coming in and handing things over. That's a part of it. But I don't know what I know. That's important for me to tell someone else. And so we've spent a great deal of time getting that information up and out so it can be distributed and followed through on.
Understood.
Okay.
You're the keeper of the institutional memory, as a professor of mine used to say. You have that history and background and don't even know what you know. And that becomes a great opportunity to be able to listen and learn, because the story that you can tell about the founding and the dream and the vision and all of that history, some of which I've learned from you first person that you've told me about to this very day. I know you're not wanting to be drawn back into that role. And you've said, I'm moving on, that door is shut, you need to find somebody else to step in. So I know today we're 45 minutes into our call and may need to begin to wind down, but we'd love the opportunity. There's a real passion for what you do. And I do think one of the advantages we have is being able to step in and really get up to the learning curve. If it would be very short for Dennis in the community with his proven track record already there and knowing a lot of the players. So, and then it's an exception, I think, at ELC that it went a year. Typically, for the sake of the recording, these interim engagements, this outsourcing that we do is a 6 to 9 month engagement, with the goal always is to leave behind at least the top 3 candidates that Dennis goes through the screening process and then presents them to you. And then we can hang around and help transfer systems and processes, especially in fundraising. But to step in immediately, take over what I said in my email, to bring the stability to that leadership role. And then at some point in time, in an agreed to date, phase back out. We're just thrilled to even be chatting about it today. Crystal, are there other questions you feel you need to hear us respond to, or the board would like to hear, even though you might know the answers, that we should get on this recording?
No, I really don't have any other questions because, as I said, this is a new next step. And the board may have questions, and I would get back in touch with you, John.
Okay.
But I appreciate the time that you shared with me today. Dennis, it's a pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure meeting you.
The time that you shared. And just one last question. I assume that you would find a way to be here in Vero Beach, Indian River County at certain times, because we would certainly need.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
No, I was there at ELC on site, different periods of time, gosh, I can't even, whenever needed, but I was there at least a week or better every month, solid.
Well, we don't have an office. Most of our work is on Zoom, but there are meetings that if we were to follow through with you, there are different meetings when we would have to ask you to come.
Right. Oh,
okay.
Absolutely. I have family there. I have family to visit. It's wonderful for me. The whole mission, as you can tell, I hope the mission is heartfelt. I do a lot of nonprofit work in a lot of other areas, but this is right in line with the mission that is in my heart. It's what I did my graduate work in. It's what I love. And the location, it gets me home. So for me, it's a wonderful project. I'm very hopeful,
Well, thank you so much, Dennis, and thank you, John, for bringing this idea. And I will get back in touch with you. I need to, as I said, talk to the board. Our next board meeting is on June the 20th. And so since it's summer, people are scattered. I really can't communicate with the board until they come back together for the meeting. So it might be a couple of weeks.
Understood.
in touch with.
And Crystal, what I would do, I'm delighted that you wanted to record it. When I get the recording, I'll email you that recording link and
Great.
also Dennis's direct contact information, because you, for whatever reason, may want to talk to him directly. Feel
Okay.
free to do that. You don't need me in the picture to perhaps move ahead, but I'll get that to you. Usually it takes just a couple hours, I think, and I'll have the recording. So probably by the end of the weekend, you'll have that link to the recording as well, if not sooner.
Wonderful. And you might include a resume, Dennis. I would imagine they're going to ask to see your resume besides what you've said on the tape. Thank you both very much. I look forward to taking whatever our next step is. It may not be this exact one, but I know we will have another step.
Well, I've enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Be well, be safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.